Hello and welcome. My name is Jessie, this is Keep It Colorful, and for today's painting tutorial, we are going to paint a palette knife bouquet of florals. We're going to be working in the impasto style, and impasto means thick layers of paint to create texture. And you can see here, we've definitely got a lot of texture going on. Impasto painting can be done with a paintbrush, but it can also be done with a palette knife, and today's tutorial is going to focus on the palette knife. This is a fantastic project if you haven't started palette knife painting yet, but you're very curious about it and maybe you don't know where to start. I'm going to go over everything, including a wide range of palette knives and how to use them to create different stems, foliage, and flower types. I'll also show you the different gels, mediums, and pastes that you can add to your paints to get nice thick texture. You can get texture that's a lot thicker than what I've got here, and I've got another example to show you. I'm even going to show you some fun ways to create texture with a kitchen spoon. So let's zoom in, take a quick peek at our supplies, and we'll paint ourselves our own palette knife bouquet. So here we are at the painting station, and here I have two versions of the same tutorial. The only difference in these two is I used some blue in this tutorial, this painting here, and I didn't really use any blue in this project here. I also really ramped up the texture factor in this painting, so this painting is actually physically heavy to the touch, and you can see I've really gone bold with all of the brush strokes in this one. So it's quite incredibly thick here. And I really love the texture and the looseness of having a lot of texture. But with today's painting, you can be as textural or just a little bit, like very, very textural and using a lot of thick buttery paint, or you could be a bit more subdued, and that's totally up to you. Our paintings today are incredibly customizable. You will need something to paint on, and today I'm working on a size 11 by 14 stretch canvas. Now you can work on canvas, but you can also work on hard surfaces like board or canvas board if you're working in really, really thick paint, like in really, really thick. You need a firmer substrate like board to do this type of painting on, but for the type of texture we're going to use today, a canvas works really, really well. Now, one thing that I do suggest is we firm up our canvases before we start, so they have some give. The way we get rid of that give is by spraying the back of our canvas with some water. So I'm just going to grab, this is just water, and as we're going through our supplies, we can let this dry. So if you have a spray bottle, great. If not, just run this under the tap. Get it nice and wet, and I like to get it into those corners, which seem to sometimes loosen up. Or, you know, just in transport, things can get, and then just rub it in a bit. And this will dry, and the whole thing will get really, really firm. So it will be the perfect support for our palette knife painting today. So if you're working on a canvas, go ahead and spray the back of it. Now I have a couple of palette knife sets here combined, and you do not have to have all of these palette knives. I just want to demonstrate them for you today. I could get away with doing the same flowers with just 3 of these palette knives, but since this is a really introductory lesson, I wanted to show you some fantastic ways that we can use all of these knives. So the palette knife is actually called a painting knife. So traditionally, the big knives that are a little bit flatter and don't have such a big swan neck are for mixing paint on the palette and scraping it off. And when I say palette, I mean when we're painting on something like I am today, which is glass, which is an ideal palette, by the way, for palette knife painting. This is a cutting board. They come in different sizes, and I'm just using the shiny side. So traditionally, this is the only one that is called a palette knife. The rest of them are called painting knives. However, the terms have become really interchangeable today, so almost everyone refers to all of these as palette knives. And the names of them, so the different shapes, aren't really standardized across the board, but the sizes tend to be. So the larger the number that you see on your palette knife, the larger your palette knife is. One of my favorite things about palette knives is that they don't have to be washed like a brush. So we're not pulling all of that acrylic paint down the drain. when you are finished with a certain color with your palette knife, you wipe it with a rag or a paper towel. So you will need to have several paper towels handy today, or an old t-shirt or some old socks. But we are gonna go through several of them throughout our painting, so make sure you have something to wipe your knives nearby. You're also gonna need some acrylic colors, and my recommendation for you was to use heavy body paint. And with Liquitex, it says heavy body on it. So this is the Liquitex heavy body line. This is the Liquitex basics line. This is not heavy body. However, we can add these modeling paste or gels to paint that isn't heavy body to make it a lot thicker. If you want really, really, really thick paint, you use heavy body plus these gels. And that's where we get into those really beautiful, super thick textures. But use your favorite colors for today. You can use plain heavy body paint without any of these pastes. You can use the paints with the pastes or gels. If you only have more fluid paints, then you can go ahead and use your fluid paints with some of this. But if you're just using fluid paint alone, it won't hold the stiff peaks. So the word impasto actually comes from an old Italian word that means roughly dough. So if we think about the thickness of the paint, we're after the thickness of dough, which is really quite thick. I'm going to show you some of the colors I'm going to be using today, but please feel free to use whatever you have in your collection. Titanium white. I want you to have some blues. These are some really lovely blues. This is Ultramarine blue, Phthalo blue, and Brilliant blue. If you just had two, Ultramarine and Phthalo are really, really nice blues. They're quite different. Ultramarine blue is purple based and Phthalo is kind of a green teal based blue. Grab some green. I'm going to be using Phthalo green today, but really bright greens like emerald green are really lovely as well. You'll want to have some yellows on hand. So a nice bright yellow, like yellow medium azo, and then a darker yellow, and that could be anything like bronze yellow or even yellow oxide. But have a nice bright yellow as well as some more dark and muted yellows. Grab a nice bright red like Napthol red, and then a crimson type red. I'm going to be using Quinacridone Crimson, but you could also use Quinacridone Magenta. Grab some purple like Dioxazine Purple. I wanted to add something fun to my painting, so I have some fluorescents left over from this tutorial here. I showed you how to paint this rainbow aurora using neon colors, and this tutorial is over on my website at jessierobertson.com. But I had all of these leftover fluorescent colors, and so I threw some of them in my painting as a last minute whim. So if you want to have some fluorescent pink or orange, and by the way, fluorescent and neon are the same, one and the same. And that is it for colors for today. But if you have any, unusual colors, I bought some colors that I don't normally buy. I can technically mix all of these colors from primary colors, but sometimes they're just so bright and juicy out of the tube, and it was Christmas and I treated myself. So these are basics. These are not heavy body, but if I was like, yes, I totally want this brilliant purple in my floral tutorial today, I would just add one of these mediums and I would thicken it right up. So don't be totally attached to using the exact same colors I have. Use whatever colors that you have at home. For thickening our colors, here are the thickeners that I recommend. I'm going to go through the differences in some of these. So this is modeling paste. This is Liquitex Basics modeling paste, and this is Golden's modeling paste. Modeling paste is semi-opaque, and what that means is that it's got a little bit of white to it. My favorite thing about modeling paste is it's really, really thick. You can also make things like leaves or roses and then carve into it or sand it. And then you can paint this after because it's a little bit porous. So you can add this right to your paints, but you can also add texture to a painting and paint it afterwards. And because it's got just a little bit of white into it, you can use this itself as thick white. And as a painter, you know, we're always running out of white paint. So you can use this as a type of white paint itself, or to tint color. So a lot of the times we're making tints of our colors, and a tint is anytime we add white to our colors. So you can use this in lieu of white or to extend your white. And with all of the pastes or gels that we use for impasto and palette knife painting, they do help us extend our color. So I'm going to be making like a fistful of red paint, and this tube of red would disappear in a single painting. But if I have modeling paste, which is cheaper, I can mix this with my red to make a large amount of it and only use maybe a third or a quarter of a tube. So this thickens the paint, and what it means when it says a paint extender is by mixing it with our colors, it makes them last longer. So that's modeling paste. It's a little bit white. The other thing that you can use to make your paint super thick is called gel, heavy gel. You can get heavy gel and you can get extra heavy gel. It also comes in different sheens. You see this one is matte and this one is gloss. So these are see-through and they won't alter your color at all. They won't lighten them at all, but they do make them more thin. Whether you're adding a heavy gel or modeling paste to your color to extend it and to make it thicker, the ratio I almost always use is 50-50. So 50% of your thickener to 50% color. We are going to begin today by pulling on our background, and you can do your background with a nice big palette knife, like some of these. I like to call all of these kind of like diamond-headed palette knives. But the bigger ones like this are really good at spreading color around. So if we grab some of these big palette knives, we can use some of these. But if you want thinner paint, or maybe you're like, oh, I've got just a bit of paint or a bit of pink, then you can also spread it around with a brush in the background. So you can decide if you want to get a brush in there. But we're going to mix our first color, and I want to do a little demonstration of the mediums. To make my pink, I'm going to use Quinacridone Crimson. Please feel free to use Quinacridone Magenta, or even mix cadmium or Napthol with some white to create a beautiful pink color as well. The exact pink, it doesn't have to be exact, just a nice kind of medium soft pink color. So here is a blob of my crimson color. And if I take my palette knife and I squish this, you can kind of see the texture of it here. So it holds its peaks, but I can move it really, really easily. So that's my heavy body paint. It's a lot thicker than soft body paint. This is the heavy gel. And in comparison to the paint, look at how thick this is. The paint holds its texture, but this is thick like cookie dough. So you can see this is kind of see-through. So if I were to do a 50-50 mixture of paint and heavy gel, I go, here's my heavy gel, here's my paint, and I mix them together. And now the paint plus the gel is just so much thicker. And the nice thing about having a glass cutting board, and I'm going to mix this nice and thoroughly. Okay, so this is a lot thicker. When I take my thing and I squish this, this is now just supremely thick here. So anything I do with my palette knife, it's going to hold that texture. So no matter what medium you're going to use, you're going to mix it really well. Now the modeling paste, as I said, is semi-opaque, which means that it will lighten the color ever so slightly. But if I do a 50-50 mixture and look at it come out, it's like stiff, right? Like it's even holding the peak from coming out. I can actually hold it because it's so stiff. even a little stiffer than toothpaste. So here is my modeling paste and here is my paint. It's a little bit more than 50-50, but it's not as white as white. So see, this is a lot of modeling paste and it's light in the color, but just a little bit. Not a lot, not a lot. So look at these beautiful, beautiful amounts of color. So if I added white to this, you'll see if I use that same amount of white, it would be a pastel color. So this is how we mix our paints in a 50-50 ratio. Now when you're finished mixing your paint, you squeeze it all off your brush. And that's why these long flexible knives are great, because you can just easily wipe them off to get all of that juicy paint off. And then we don't need to rinse our brush. You just take your paper towel and you wipe. If you're forgetful at all and maybe you let some paint dry on your knife, then you could dip it into a little jar of water, and in a minute or two, that paint softens, and again, just wipe it in your brush. But don't stress about little bits of paint like this on your brush, okay? And you're gonna keep this napkin handy dandy. Now for the background, I used a really light pink. So I'm gonna take some white. And by the way, we can mix this right on our canvas. So I could even just do a little zigzag. So I could take my white. I'm gonna grab my background palette knife. So I love the metal ones, you guys, because they're really flexible. And this allows me a lot more range of motion. So you can pre-mix this color, but I like to take just a little bit of pink and even just start playing around, mixing it right on here. Oh, I like that color, nice and soft, nice and light. And you don't have to use a brush. I mean, you can definitely just smooth your background color right on using the knife. And this will get you feeling a bit more comfortable with your knife. Just any practice that we get with our knife is great. So add that color really slowly for me. And the nice thing about this is once the paint's on, you can even create texture in your background, right? So you can do fun things by going all in one direction. But for now, before it dries, we just wanna spread it all over first. Don't lose any off those edges and smooth it all over. If you need pink, add it really slowly, like I'm going just a tip in there, just a little. You know, palette knife is fun, even if you do a solid white background. Even if you do a solid white background, it still has dimension to it. If we just put on solid white with a brush, there wouldn't be quite so much texture. But when we use thick paint and a knife, we can create amazing texture. So I'm covering everything. And yes, if you have some paint left over, you can wrap it around the edges of your canvas as well. And I definitely did that in my demo painting. I took it like this. Great for some of this scrap stuff. I just kind of scrape it on and then it depends on if you want to frame it or not. So if you do the edge is the frame. If you leave it edgeless, then you can definitely frame it. I'm just scraping this on so it's kind of like rustic looking. You want that looseness, you want that texture. If there's a lip and you're doing your edges, you've got to accommodate for the, you know, that edge here. Okay. So if we want to do all of our edges, and And if you're painting on something flat like a board, so spread it thin on the edge. We don't want to waste precious paint, but this is a really lovely way to finish a painting. And on some of my demos, I actually wrapped my flowers around the edges too for a really cool 3D look. We're gonna get a bit goopy today. So now that this paint is on, we can leave it as is, like fast and loose, or you can play with it a bit. So you can start maybe going all in one direction. When we take the whole fat side of our brush and rub, it definitely creates a very specific texture and kind of the direction that we're pushing or pulling, kind of see what side the edges forms on. If I pull, I create a lip where I pull. Now, one of the best things about palette knife painting is, believe it or not, the next layer is applied right over top of the wet background. So palette knife painters, they very rarely let their paint dry because the paint is so thick. When we apply it softly, kind of like holding our brush and just layering it over top, it just sort of floats on top. And that's why I had a lot of questions about can I use just regular paint for this? It will not, it will settle in if it's thin. It's like, imagine building a snowman. So we've got a thick layer of snow and then another thick layer of snow. If you tried to build a snowman with pudding, it doesn't hold its shape. So that's why we have such thick paint for this. Okay. Now, so traditionally painters do not dry their layers in between. There may be a technique where you're like, oh, I just put it on really thick and then maybe you have to let it dry. And if, for instance, I put on super thick leaves, you know, that were like an inch off the canvas, I might want to let it dry then. But with a regular amount of texture, you don't have to. Okay, so we've got our background covered. We've got just residual on our knife, and then you wipe. It doesn't have to be perfect, just like I don't worry about a little bit of residue. Okay, there we go. I love that knife, that long, flexible knife. These are some of my favorite knives that I like to use for everything. Like any other painting, we're gonna build this up from the background to the foreground. When we're playing with paint this thick, it actually takes quite a long time to dry. So you could go have a snack if you want and come back and this would likely still be fairly wet. It does dry faster than oil painting. And this is traditionally done with oil paints because they're so thick and juicy. And what a great way for oil painters to build up texture because they don't have to wait for it to dry like if they were doing thin layers with a brush. So we are going to build up background to foreground, and what we're going to have next is some foliage. Now I'm going to use Phthalo green, and Phthalo, by the way, is just short for phthalocyanine. We use Phthalo green and we use Phthalo blue. That's just sort of an abbreviation. So I'm going to pour out a little bit of green. And this is a very blue green. This is a very blue green. So if I take some modeling paste or some heavy gel and I add this to this, 50-50, okay? 50-50. It's gonna lighten it a little bit. And again, remember, our mixing brushes wanna be long and flexible so it's easy to clean them. If I tried to say mix with this brush is not flexible, so it's really hard to, I actually can't get it to go flat at all. So, and little brushes, little palette knives don't work as well as these. So that modeling paste will lighten that color a bit, but just a little bit, and it will make it beautiful and flat. And if I want some of the pure dark color, I just use the paint without the modeling paste. But here's phthalo green, and here's how it looks, the color. Okay. Now, it's always nice to have a bit of a variety of shades whenever we're doing a single flower or some foliage. So some ways we can alter the color of our green is by mixing some yellow into it, or blue. So a little bit of blue, like a phthalo blue or ultramarine blue, or I have this brilliant blue here, a titch of blue with a little bit of this green would make a really beautiful, like blue-green. Ooh. Okay. I could also mix a little bit of my phthalo green with a dark yellow, bronze yellow, or yellow oxide. It's yellow oxide. They'll make it almost like an army green. So I'm going to use this bronze yellow because they're not bright yellows. Here's bronze yellow. Yellow oxide is more yellow, but it's a bit of orangey red in it, which will, so here's these two colors side by side. They're just a little bit different. And if I mix a little bit of this green in here, it's going to create more of like a forest, kind of like camo pea green. So look, we've got 3 greens. Lovely, lovely. Bit of modeling paste in this one. This thick stuff, toothpastey texture. Okay. So let's mix some colors, and pause this video anytime you want to, and feel free to use bright greens. Really, your colors are very personal to you. If you look at your pink, make a green you think would look really nice to this. We want to work with some darker greens that will really help our foliage pop, but you could add yellow to make it more emerald color. Okay, you guys, you can see the pink background, and now look at this painting, imagining the flowers aren't there and all of this foliage. We've got long skinny lines. We've got some little leaves here, kind of going side to side. Some really thin lines, and the palette knife makes thinner lines than most brushes can do. And here you can see as well, really thin lines. And then here's a really lovely kind of blue-green. Here's more of an emerald green and how that looks with the pink. Okay, so now we're gonna pull on that foliage. It's always good practice after you mix colors, even if it's what you're using to clean your palette knife. Just get in that habit of anytime there's paint on it. So for straight lines, again, we can use these long diamond-headed palette knives. So here's 2 different palette knives that we can use to create some long, skinny lines. And one of my favorites for creating leaves is actually this one, the angle-headed one. So we're gonna use palette knives that look a little something like this. Go for the larger ones instead of this is more for like detail in the leaves and in the petals, but some long skinny ones. So you can see compared to my hand, these are quite big. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna load up the edge of our palette knife here, and we're gonna hold it right on its side like this, and we're gonna pull up into that paint. We're gonna almost like score the paint a little bit in the process. So, and by the way, you can see how shiny my background is. So I've got this little line here, and you can start at the bottom or the top. Feel free to watch me first here. So I'm gonna come from the bottom, and I'm just dragging it slowly up. I can curve it in and up. I can even come right off, okay? So you can see my paint drag through that pink. You can either wipe that off or mix it in, okay? So scraping, loading up that edge all the way up, loading up all the way up. And let's do it again, down below. So if I hold my knife more flat down, it's going to make a bit of a wider. So I'm starting like this. And if I hold my brush more flat, obviously more of that paint's going to come off of there. Okay. So I'm going to grab some of this blue. Bluey green. You can even get a couple colors on your brush at the same time. Oh, and you can start from the top. Just hold that brush pretty much 90 degrees, like straight up and down. I'm going to drag it down. I might even fold it so it's flat at the bottom and get it a bit thicker. I can come back through here and try to drag some of that down. Just go slow. And I don't know if you can see, I've got a napkin here and I'm wiping. Okay. So, you know, in nature, things are really organic. So I can hold out like this and pull it down to get a real arc. You don't need a lot of paint on here. Okay, I do that again. I'm gonna hold it and I'm gonna pull it. So I think half the trick with the palette knife is just, there's so many different textures we can get and we can pull it this way or this way. But just get in there. Again, 90 degrees, and then the more you flatten it, the fatter it will get. Okay, I might just do couple more. You can run a couple of these off your ends if you have some extra green. You know, maybe you just want some green down here. It's going to be full of foliage, so you know, why not? Okay, you guys. So that is how we get straight lines. Now I'm gonna wipe my knife. I'm gonna wipe this knife. And you can do the same thing with this diamond-headed one, right? You just go in there, and this one's even skinnier, so it's gonna get me skinnier lines. And by the way, just carving in as well, like with the very tip of a pointy one like this. You can just scrape in, and if you've got some thick paint, just scraping adds some really beautiful texture, maybe some traces of paint. You don't have to do everything I'm doing, just, okay. Now I want to show you how to get some thicker foliage as well, and I can't wait to show you this palette knife here. So far we've used these three. This one for spreading the background. These two kind of diamond head ones for straight lines. Now this one here is great for little bits of foliage. So I'm gonna take some paint and I can show you right on the palette. So I wanna load just the tip of this brush, okay? Just the tip, and I'm gonna pull this way and this way. So the motion is like this. Okay, so my wrist is arcing this way and also this way. So here I go, arc, arc, arc. It gets me these little like leaf shapes. And I can do it this way, arc, arc, arc. Add a bit more yellow to this blue, which will itself make green. And this is not bright yellow, this is a bronzy yellow or yellow oxide. Okay, so whenever I mix, I take a napkin and I just wipe. I want just paint where it's loaded on the brush, okay? So I'm gonna do some little leaves here. So I'm gonna hold this brush like this. Okay, I'm pulling down, I'm just holding the tip, oops, sorry, the tip like this. I'm angling it so not totally 90. I'm a little bit flat. So this is 90 degrees, and that's gonna get me a straight line. So I have to hold kind of the edge down and pull. And that could be leaves, but that could be, you know, like where buds come out on, say, like a foxglove. You can see the little buds come out and then the flowers dangle off of those little green bits. And this could come off one side, but you could also have it come off both sides. And if you want to have an even smaller one, just kind of just take your napkin and make sure you've got paint just on the very tip of that brush. So I might come here, one side, and then the other side. Okay, this is also lovely for doing larger leaves. So I might take this palette knife, not totally flat, not totally straight up and down, on a bit of an angle. I might say come up here and hold it like this and then pull down. That's gonna get me some bigger foliage. So you gotta think about what happens if you pull it one way or the other way. Okay. You don't have to have this many big bits of foliage, but I did want to show you that. So for here, if you want to leave, we got to pull in this way if we want some leaves here with this brush. I'm running out of paint, which is why it's kind of dragging into my pink a little. But that's okay. You can even kind of smear it into the pink, and that's like a different look too. Little taps, just keep it loose for me. We're not going to stress about anything today. We're just exploring, maybe for the first time. Wipe off your knife. Once we have our foliage on, we are going to start getting into the colors and building up our florals. Now, if you find that you're running out of room on your palette knife and you've got a bit of color that you've scraped clean and it's starting to dry, this is traditionally what the palette knife is used for, is for scraping paint off. So my greens here, some of them are still wet, but the paste and gels dry quite firm. So I can actually just put a little pressure, and I can use it to scrape an area clean, and then I can mix another color right over here. So I picked up all of that quasi-dry stuff. I could just wipe it on a napkin here. There, my brush is clean and my palette is clean, so I can mix right over this area. Now the first thing I want to put on here is a poppy. So I'm going to use some of this crimson-y kind of dark red, as well as a nice bright red, like a Napthol red. And Napthol and Cadmium medium hue are almost the exact same color. It is really difficult to tell the difference. They're both warm, very vibrant, very bright reds. I just don't have any of my cadmium in a heavy body, so I'm going to use this stuff here, and I'm going to mix it with some modeling paste. If you don't have crimson, you can darken red with Dioxazine purple as well. And I actually like to use a bit of Dioxazine purple for the center of a poppy. So we'll use some crimson. We'll use some really, really bright cadmium. So kind of like a dark red and a light red. And here you can see some of these loosey-goosey poppy shapes. It's always nice to have a little bit of white when we are creating a flower. Okay. A little bit of white there as well. Clean your brush by wiping it on a napkin. Poppies have really big petals, and I believe traditionally it's 4 or 6 petals to a poppy. They're big, broad flowers, and if we're looking straight on, we'd see a big kind of circle, but if our poppy was kind of tilted to the side, we'd see half a poppy. So we'd see those front petals coming up and the back petals coming up as well. And why don't we play with some of our round-headed palette knives, or even a kitchen spoon if your collection didn't come with a round-headed one. So this one I like, but it's not very flexible. This one is small and has a pointy tip, but it's so flexible. And the spoon works really, really great for a poppy as well. But no matter which of these 3 palette knives we use, it's gonna make a really lovely poppy shape. When we're building up in 3D, we want the flowers, the petals that are kind of in behind, like if this flower is tilted on its side, these ones we're gonna pull up and over after. So I'm gonna take my little round palette knife and it's gonna load the edge with some dark stuff, and I might put a poppy right here. So if I take this and I pull in and down, so we don't wanna pick up the green, so push nice and lightly. And here I'm using really thick paste. I might grab a little white and a little red. So I've got like 3 different colors on my brush. Let it float on top. So here, when we're working on top, we want to just gently glide across and pull down. So the motion is here. You can push in a little bit, but I don't want to pick up that green. Now you can't really see the green on my paint because it's so thick, but I got a little bit there. So if you get green on your brush, wipe. So here's the back of our poppy. And I'm gonna do maybe 3 petals, and you can pull down, but also experiment with pushing in and up. And maybe you'll have, here's 1, 2, 3 petals. Okay. Here's our big petals in behind. Check for any green that might be on your tool. If there's no green, all good. Let's take some of our lighter red here, and maybe a little bit of white on the same brush. And now we're gonna do some petals that are kind of coming up and over the flowers. So I might start at the top, push in just a bit and pull down. Gonna pull down. Could even scoop around the bottom if it helps shape it up for you, but pull down. So this is our poppy. It's kind of like a little bowl shape. Wipe off your knife as soon as you're done using it. Just good practice. When you're ready, we can use a detailed knife to pull in the dark center. And here's a poppy I did in all crimson here. And pull, 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 pull. Here's some little ones that are just a couple strokes, but we use that dioxazine purple in the center, and then we'll add white seeds, the little white seeds. And to get those little details, we use a detail knife. And your smaller knives, these are all 1s and 2s that have pointy little tips, like these, are what we're gonna use to pull the details in the center. So I'm gonna use this little one because we haven't used it yet. And I'm gonna take my purple and I'm gonna grab it just the tip, and I'm not gonna add modeling paste to this. I'm gonna put it in where the center of my flower is. Just gently deposit it. And then you can go right in and tap, okay? So I'm gonna tap this. 1, you can create texture, but 2, you can create little dots. So anytime I'm tapping in, I'm pulling a little bit of this out as well. Okay. So here we have a wonderful abstract poppy from the side. And again, your little brush, and I want you to make sure you're always cleaning that brush for me. Let's do another poppy in a similar way. I'm gonna pour a bit more white. And again, if you don't have crimson, you can darken red with a little bit of purple to make a beautiful crimson color. Okay, so here we go. Let's do a little one with the spoon. just because it's so darn fun. So I'm gonna take some of my dark mixture, maybe a little white, maybe a little bright red. I've loaded the tip of my spoon. Okay, I'm gonna go one, this is gonna be a bit of a smaller one, 1, 2, and then 3 for the bottom. So the motion is gonna be spoon, flat, light. Remember, we're dragging over the surface now, like with the flat side of our brush. So here I go. And we're gonna go 1. You can pull or push. I want you to try both. Oop, I got a little green, but I'm just gonna go over it again. So 1, 2. I'm gonna take a lot of white on this one and I'm gonna pull a petal up. 3. So this is such a lovely little texture. Really simple little flower. Okay. And you could have another little one here. So you can definitely use your spoon if you don't have a round-headed palette knife. If you have this round palette knife in your collection, this is another wonderful knife. I find I really need to kind of scrape the paint once it starts to dry, but here's this. And again, I can do just a really little abstract one. I could even come across the top, swooping this way. And then I could swoop around the bottom. Maybe one more little flower here. Sometimes I love just pushing in to try to get a really juicy bit of texture. Again, trying not to pull up some green. And I did pull up a little bit of green, but it was a bluey green and it mixed with my red for a beautiful kind of color. So part of it is not overdoing it too much. And when you're ready, we can take some of this dark color if you want some like a center in these poppies. We'll pull in the dark. Maybe my dark will be down below on this one. You can tap into it if you like that look. Grab some purple, like Dioxazine purple. I already have a little bit here, so I want to use that. And we're going to make a lilac color, and Ultramarine is a beautiful blue for creating lilac color. So if you have some Ultramarine blue, you can use that. If not, use any blue you have and mix it with a bit of purple and it will make a shade of lilac. So here's my Ultramarine. And I like making this a bit of a lighter color. So I'm going to pour little bits of white for each of these. And I'm going to mix it with that modeling paste. So we don't have huge amounts of color here, but we're going to do some little details in purple and lilac. So approximately 50-50. If you're using soft body paints, definitely at least 50-50 for me, okay? 50-50 should be pretty decent for non-heavy body paints. Okay, so I want to do some little bitty bell-like flowers in the purple tones. So that's these flowers here. So this type of flower here, these little bitty tips. And we're going to use our diamond-headed palette knives, but just the tip of them to create some of these little florals. And my favorite one is this one that's just little dots. Reminds me of little hyacinths. So we want to control the tips of these. So the difference between this and this is I allow the paint to come down further on the knife. So let's create our colors. Modeling paste with the white and a little bit of color. Let's keep it pastel, okay? So here's a pastel purple, and you can save some of your dark color in case you want to add some of the pure dark color. So there's a purple and this white. A little bit of that blue into the white plus the modeling paste. and ultramarine blue. It already is kind of a lilac-y color, isn't it? Okay, and then I might do some in some pure white. So the modeling paste is a lot thicker than just the plain white. So that's why I use both, even with my white. Okay, so some plain white. And we can mix these two colors together to make a really, really lilac-y color. Okay, so here we've got 3 different shades of this color. And after mixing, wipe for me. So if we look at the tips of these brushes, they are almost the same. So you could really use either one of these. The only difference is this one's more flexible and this one's more stiff. And since this is an exploratory class, I want you to try both. So I want to pull some little bell-like flowers somewhere. And I'm thinking some maybe longer bells here. So I might take a bit of the purple, a bit of the blue, kind of load up one side of my brush and my knife, and I'm gonna pull some of these right up here. Okay, so I'm gonna push in flat, I'm gonna drag it down, try not to pull up the green. If you did get some green, just stop and clean your brush. So if you can't see the green on here, but I did pick it up underneath, so I don't want to re-add it on there. So I'm going to wipe that bit off. And as I come up, I want to get a little bit smaller. So I had the whole brush loaded, and now I want to make sure I've loaded just the tip. And I can pull or push a little flower. Just orient your brush in the direction you want that to go. You can add some white into these. And here I really push down, so I've got this really beautiful kind of like texture, squishy texture here, because I smooshed it in and then pulled. And it just naturally makes these flowery shapes. And we're going right over wet paint here. I know that can take a little bit of getting used to, but it's so much fun. And the easiest way is just to get in and start doing it. Okay. So I've got this blue business here. Now let's do some in some plain white. And here I really want to just use the tippy tip of this brush. I want to make some really little ones. So I'm going to go like this, and I may come up on here and space these out and just do little pulls. I check every time, and these little flowers, these little ones. We can overlap down here, like maybe this one is in behind these poppies. And okay, maybe I get some see, I mix, so now I need to make sure it's just at the tip when I go to apply it. Maybe do some more of these little ones. Now we have so many stems, like these could just be coming from anywhere. Pull that paint and squish it. If you're pulling up your green from below, again, don't worry, just get that paint on and try to use that flat brush for me. Okay, so here I'm using quite a bit of paint. Right? And I'm just almost flat. I'm squishing and pushing down, but not so hard that I'm pulling up that green and getting these really fun edges. And we can add more of these little ones later, but it's fun to get some in. Okay. So have fun exploring the little taps. And again, you can definitely, I always kind of do another pass through at the end, and I tend to add a lot of these little tiny ones to create movement through the floral scape. Now, whenever I'm done and my paint starts to dry, I do like to take a bigger palette knife and just scrape it. Otherwise, you run out of real estate really fast. If you're using something like parchment paper or whatnot, you may just have to toss it. You're not going to be able to scrape it. But if you like this palette knife painting, invest in one of these cutting boards. They're super cheap, they're super strong. Let's get into some really beautiful peaches and yellows. So here I might actually bust out this neon pink. Remember, neon and fluorescent are the same. Just gonna squeeze out some of my neon pink here. It is just so bright, this color, and when I mix it with white, you'll see it gets even brighter. Then we'll want some bright yellow. We're gonna pull on some yellow roses now. So get some bright yellow. And this yellow and this pink together make a really beautiful peachy color as well. So we'll want white for this. And we'll want some of our paste. I might even pull some white up to this crimson. Might use some of it since I mixed it all up. So let me show you the pink. I don't have to use all of it. I'm gonna first mix some of it with the modeling paste and the white, and it is just so bright. It's like, wow. Tickle the eyeballs, bright. But what a vibrant, pretty pink it makes, even as a pastel. So like, look at this color. Okay, scrape it off, and I'm gonna mix some yellow into my white, and it doesn't have to be all. It's nice to have a pastel version that we can add a little more yellow to if we want a darker yellow as well. And this painting is quite heavy on the lighter values. Okay, we've got some plain white there if we need it. Now I've got some modeling paste, and I'm gonna bring in just a little bit of this color, and this could be a good shadow color. And here I'm using the modeling paste as a white pretty much. I can actually take a bit of this white, add some Dioxazine purple too, a bit of this crimson, so making a pinky purple color. Okay, so here we have a variety of pinks, a variety of yellows. And if I mix some of this yellow and some of this pink together, it gives me a beautiful peach. So look at this color. So this is that bright yellow mixed with this pink here, and I just love the color that this makes. So remember, if we mix this with a bit more yellow, it's gonna get darker. This will make a darker pink. So we can make a lot of combinations from these colors here. So I like to pull a big rose in. So we have 3 poppies. The rose is really the other big flower in this composition. Then we have these really amazingly textural daisies and some abstract, what are these, pansies, violet kind of type flowers here. So here we've got a rose from the side. Here we've got a little baby rose, some little rose buds, and the big rose here. So for my big rose, I like adding a little bit of a darker color to the center of it. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of this and kind of decide what angle you want your rose on. So, you know, she's maybe gonna be big here. And if I want her, my big rose, say right here, maybe it's like on a big angle, maybe it's on a little angle. I wanna kind of decide where the middle of my rose is gonna be. So I'm gonna, again, pushing really lightly, you guys, just so I dance on top. I've got a really dark green leaf here. So I'm gonna, you know, roses are kind of like a compact ball in the center, and the petals sort of loosely fall away from that. So here I've created that little spiral in the center of the rose. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. And I'm going to wipe the purple off of this little brush. Going to add a little more modeling paste to my fluorescent color. The fluorescent color was not heavy body to start, and I really want this to be a bit of a stiffer color. Okay. So here's my fluorescent pink, nice and stiff. And here I'm using my little diamond shape, and I'm going to load this little brush. And I want to start coming around my rose. So I'm going to kind of swoop in a little bit. And I'm going to come around this purple. And just little pulls. Kind of outlining it in these little strokes. Then I'm going to go into some of this peachy color, and I'm going to start to get a little bit bigger. If your green is giving you a lot of grief, you can just wait for it to dry. Let me get into some of my darker rose here. I'm going to kind of swoop around with these smaller petal shapes. There we go. Kind of a dusty peach color. As I start to come out from the center, I can start to get a little bit bigger. So load that brush with thick paint. And now I'm going to get a little bigger. I'm going to add some more modeling paste in white. I want these colors to get really light, almost white towards the outside. So here I've got a really light peach, and I'm going to start to create some bigger petal shapes. Here you can even switch to a round brush if you want. So here's where petals are going to kind of swoop and fall away. You can grab some of your pink and your light color at the same time. I see a bit of green there. So I'm going to really loosen these petals up towards the outside. Still an abstract-y rose shape. Have this rose called a peace rose, and it's yellow with hints of blush, kind of a blushing pink, just like this. Okay. You could add some darker pink and even, so some of your crimson, even a little bit more of that neon color to that little inside area if you want something bold. Remember, it's kind of a little spiral shape in there. Don't push too hard. Was dangerously close to my green there. Okay, so I find this rose was for me at least the kind of most challenging to do. Swirl around and around. You can always go back in. You can always go back in. Like a tighter spiral in the middle. And I have so much paint here. I'm not picking up this wet green because it's thick. I'm just very lightly carving into it. If you've picked up green, don't despair. Just let it sit for a little bit. I'm actually really fond of this rose. And this rose happened because I pulled so much green up. This is a purple and pink rose. I pulled so much green up, the green mixed with the neon pink, and it looked really bad, but I just let it sit for a minute. And then once it was just a little bit tacky, the paint not quite so slippery wet, I just came in with another layer and I fixed it up, and now it's my favorite rose of all time. My favorite that I've done, you know what I mean. Palette knife rose that I created. So that can happen, one of those happy accidents where we do something and we're like, oh no, it's ruined, but it's not really ruined because we can always get back in there. We can always fix it. And I know with people think it's just kind of like one stroke and you're done with the palette knife, but they are actually really fun and workable for a lot longer than I think people think. It may help you to look at a picture of even a peace rose. They're what I was thinking about when I made this. I grew them so they're embedded in my memory. And I like keeping my edges really rough and loose for this. So sometimes I'll even like pull up a bit to get that ruffled edge look, that bit more. Oops, I got my green. So I got my green. I'm not going to panic. I'm just going to take another color and swoop it out. And look, it almost looks like a double petal there. So you can really have fun with these. It's a light touch, thick and goopy and light. So take your time with your rose, and if you need to, take a break. Okay, you guys, roll your shoulders. That was a hard one, but hopefully lots of fun as well. Just relax into it. The next rose is another one of my favorites. It's a lot easier to do. Again, this is kind of the trickiest flower in the tutorial today. So this rose from the side, we're gonna mix some more of our colors if we're out, and it's full of texture. And this is a really fun 3D flower to make, because we're going to start just some little pulls for the petals and behind, and then pull, 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 maybe a pull to kind of close up the top, and then when we're finished we'll add a little green where it connects. So we're going to get into some of these smaller roses and maybe some little buds here. So we need to make sure we have some of our peachy colors. So we maybe need to mix some more modeling paste plus pink. And if you don't mix them all the way, you can get some cool striations. Modeling paste plus our light yellow, and just some modeling paste on its own or with a little white. It depends on how much white you have. If you're running out, you can just use that modeling paste like it is white itself. So I like to use a little diamond shaped brush for this, and we'll need some of our peaches and our yellows and all that. So I'm gonna start with some of this pink and maybe a bit more of this like crimson pink here in the background. Okay. So just a more muted pink than the neon pink. So I'm gonna take some of this color, maybe with some of the peach and the, so I've just loaded my brush with these colors here. And I might have mine kind of on an angle this way. So it's like a little bowl shape, and my petals are gonna come this way, just like I did on this one here. Okay, so I'm gonna pull down for 2 petals, and then I'm gonna get some new color. 1, this one was actually this way. 3, and then up with a lighter one in front to create where the base of the stem comes into the petals. So here we go. Pick that orientation. So big juicy paint, 1. Almost a bit of a roll to create that thick petal there. 2. Okay. I'm going to grab some more color, and then I'm going to go layer over top, start at the top. I'm going to smoosh down 1. Maybe a big one like this. 2. I'm going to try to kind of taper it in a little bit here. I've got white and yellow and peach. And now I want to have, I'm going to turn my knife this way. I'm going to pull I wanted this big juicy roll here. Okay. Then I might go right into some color and then right over top. So we've got these really layered petals. And you can go back in and shape them up a bit. Gotta be careful, there's some blue there. Stay away from that blue hue. Another fun thing about palette knife painting is you don't always have to put it right on the palette. I could just squeeze a little white out on here, and I could do another. Okay, I'm happy with my shape. I'm not gonna touch it. And let's do one more little rose shape today. And that's a rose that's a bit more closed, so we can just see that tight, it's like petals wrapped around each other, like a spiral of petals here. And then some of these bigger petals loosening up. So it will actually be with the tip of a diamond head knife, or detailed diamond head knife, like the smaller one. A little swirl, and then you can see the one that's underneath here. So I want swoop, 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 swoop. Let me show you another one so you get the idea for these. So this is done in a paler yellow here. Same thing, swirl, swoop, swoop. This is my side rose here, and I used sand medium. I grabbed the wrong one instead, and it added a sandy texture. There's all kinds of mediums that can add texture to your palette knife paintings. Glass bead medium, a sand medium. It's a world of fun. So if you want to try this type of painting again, you can get little sets of different mediums in littler tubes like these if you want to explore them. Another couple brands that are heavy body paint, but it's not on the label, are Golden. Golden, their regular paints are heavy body. They also have a line called Open, and you don't want to get the open ones because they have an extended dry time. And the reason we love palette knife painting in acrylic is because it dries a little bit faster. But regular golden paint, not the open, is heavy body. Winsor & Newton is heavy body. It's more like the thickness of thick toothpaste. Okay, so here's some yellow, and we're gonna keep some of this darker. And this is just that light yellow with the modeling paste, so it's a bit darker. And then I can take some of this light yellow and mix it with some white if you want a lighter one. And I'm mixing right over top of these peachy pinks. Okay, so we could start, never forget to white, their dark color. And I'm just gonna fill kind of the tip of this for now. And I wanna decide where I want this little guy to be. I want it over here, but I'm so nervous. I'm gonna pull up my green. I'm gonna go for it. Okay, wish me luck. This is a really thick leaf here, but I'm gonna hold flat and I'm gonna go like that. A lot of modeling paste in here. I'm gonna wipe off in between and I'm gonna create a little spiral. And then I'm gonna go swoop. Swoop. I've got that paint on there. I did start to pull green, but you see I just added another layer. So I'm just gonna recreate that spiral. I'm not gonna push my luck. I like my two open petals. You stay over there, green. And there's a little tiny compact rose there. Last but not least, you may want some buds on your flowers, on your roses. And a beautiful knife for making buds is this knife here. So I'm gonna take some white right over these peachy colors. I may need a bit more. Okay, so I've just mixed, and by the way, you don't have to use your finger to wipe your knife like I've been doing. You can just do it with your towel. So for that little bud, I'm gonna close up a little bud right here, and I'm gonna go 1, 2. You could even do 3, so I could even put 1 in the middle, just with the tip of the knife like that. So the motion is 1 and 2, 3. And this shape closes it up. So 1, 2, 3. I lost my tip. So I got a cute little flower bud. Okay. You could just have dabs of color in your painting. Oh, there's always that one flower you can't stop messing with. Usually for me, it's this big fellow, but today it's this little one. This is usually an easy one. Okay, I'm gonna take my own advice and I'm gonna stop messing with it right after this last little bit. Okay, good. It's time to add some little daisies to our painting, and I think this is one of my favorite flowers to create. They're just so, you just push right in and the paint squeezes over the sides. It's really satisfying. So here are some little daisies I did in white with a little bit of brilliant blue or a little bit of phthalo blue. And if you're just adding a tiny bit of color, like let's say you don't have any heavy body blue, as long as you have heavy body white or modeling paste, a titch of the regular body paint will do. But brilliant blue, or I just want a bit of a greeny blue in here. We've got a lot of those purpley blues. Let's get one more vibrant springy color, make it a bit pastel-y. So I'm going to use brilliant blue, just a little. Just going to pour a little of this blue. This is brilliant blue here. And I want this to be thick, really thick. We've mixed all of our colors with white today, which is why I suggested modeling paste for your thickener today. If you were doing a really dark painting, I would have recommended you used heavy gel since it's see-through and we wouldn't want to lighten our colors. Okay, so here is the heavy gel plus the white, and let's mix it up with a mixing knife. And we can keep some of this white. We can make white ones. This is so thick. I added a lot of the paste. I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to go just the tip into this blue, like the tiniest little bit, and I'm going to add it. You could make a little bit that's even darker. But here I've got a light one, white, light blue, darker blue. Wipe your mixing knife. Okay. And we want to use one of our little diamond-headed brushes, and either one will do. And again, these flowers, we'll put a little yellow center on them, but I like to do one in the middle, one on the side, and it's just into that paint. And you can put the paint as long as you want your petal to be. So if you want a smaller flower, you're just gonna load the tip of that knife. Longer petal, you're gonna load it a little more. So you can kind of fill up here with a few of these, and then all we're gonna do is fill in a few flowers at the bottom, like maybe some purpley pansies, if you like the neon pink, some quick gestural ones, and then that will be it. So this is one of our last ones. Here I did my flowers, but in a whitish, kind of white, and then light bluey teal instead of the blue. So this painting is pretty much no blue, just a little bit of ultramarine. But here we go. It's nice to start with the white, or not the white, the light blue, because we're gonna do the middle. Got the tip of my flower. Okay, so I'm gonna go these are a little trickier to pick up than most paintings. I'm gonna go, just push it in. One. Then I'm gonna go into the pure white. A nice juicy amount of color, and then I'm gonna go, I'm not gonna push too hard here because I've got green underneath, but 2. I'm gonna go into the darker blue. And oh, so satisfying. And then wipe, and you can do as many of these as you like. Okay, so I might do another one here. 1. 2. Now in this painting, I put a little teeny tiny one up top. Okay, so same idea, just you may want to use a skinnier brush with a skinnier tip, brush, knife, like this for a little bitty. Okay, maybe we go 1, 2, 3. Now we want to look at our composition and see if there's any areas we might want to fill. I know we likely have this lower area here, and we can fill that with really fun gestural flowers in any of the colors that you feel like you need. Like maybe you want some of that bright pink color. Mix it with some of this, which I still have. Okay. Yeah, maybe we just do a really fast and loose flower here. Even just like 3 petals like swooping off the side. Or maybe you really loved the purple color and you wanted a little bit more of a pansy type flower. So just a little petal here or there with a dark center for some of these last minute kind of gestural flowers. You get some of that. Use up what's on your palette or mix a color that you really love. So I'm just doing little 3 petals or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 little swoops. Okay, be really loose at this point. Maybe you really love that brilliant blue and you want some more of it somewhere. Okay. You could have a little headed brush anytime you want some more of those little tappy flowers. Okay, so here's where it's fun to loosen up and be really expressive. Now, I don't know about you, but my painting needs something in this upper area, and I think a little bit of white is always really nice. I'm using this really pointy brush here, and I'm just going to use this little tip, and I'm just going to pull in like a little and this is heavy body paint without any medium in it. Just wanting to add some little texture here, and it could be a green leaf. Now while I'm working in the white, I'm going to take it some right on the tip of this detailing brush, and I'm going to put some little tiny dots right in the dark purple in the center of the poppies. Just a little dot or 2. Just be really light. And in some of your looser abstract flowers, you can add a dark center to those or a yellowy orange center to those. So a little yellow with a bit of our neon pink makes a beautiful orange color. Add a little white. I like this a little bit more on the yellow side. Okay. And we can pull a center into our little Shasta daisy type flowers. can also use your Dioxazine purple to create a dark center in these little flowers. So I think I might actually lighten my little flowers a little. Could use my spoon. So I just have these 3 little petals, and if I put a dark center in them, I've got a really nice abstract flower. Okay. So I want you to just fill your painting, the loose abstract pattern. If you have any little spaces left, now is the time. Get that beautiful overall pattern using any of the flower types that we did today. I think I need a little daisy in here, so I'm mixing a bit more of this blue. I kind of want a big one. I don't know about you, but I am a wonderful mess. Okay, I was gonna pick this up so I could show you. So I've loaded this really long. I'm gonna squish, squish. Squish. And then a little something yellowy for the center. Sometimes to round out a painting, we might need to add a stem or two. I don't mind some floating flowers, especially if I've really filled my composition with stems to begin with. But you know, this rose here, I always like to add a little bit of a stem to it with some light green or any that just are glaringly floating. So you can definitely mix up a little bit of some green. We could pull a little green into here, or anywhere you feel like you maybe need just a little more stem, a little more leaf, a little more green color, even if you just love green and you wish there was some green somewhere. Okay. When you feel like you're done, make sure you wipe off all of your knives. As soon as your palette is dry, you'll find it can get a little bit difficult to scrape, but if you just spritz it with a little bit of water, if you have any thick paint, like let's say you're someone you're like, I don't like wasting paint, I put all this money into it, I'm gonna show you a really fun thing that you can do to save if you've got some bigger bits on your palette when you're done. So I've got this big thing of teal. Let this dry. When it's dry, I would spritz it with this. And once I let the water sit for about 30 seconds, I can take a palette knife or a razor blade and I can scrape it off and I'll get little bits of colored plastic. You could save those in a little container, and I have a really beautiful project for, that I want to do a little bit later this summer. They're called paint skins. When you peel it's basically plastic sheets, so your little bits of colored plastic, and we can do some fun projects with those skins later. So peel them off, save the good bits, the big bits, and we can use them later on. Well, this is the end of our palette knife bouquet tutorial. I hope you're feeling a little bit looser and a little less intimidated by your palette knives. They make so many beautiful marks, and even if something appears to be really, really ruined, we just have to tell ourselves that we can fix it, walk away for a little bit, even sometimes let it dry, and then add another layer on top. This is one of my favorite ways to paint. It's so relaxing, it's so meditative. You just get in there and kind of squish your colors around, and you can make as many of these types of floral abstract floors as you like. You can get even looser, or you could make much more tighter and controlled brush strokes like the ones I showed you in the tulip painting here, where we can get you can get almost realistic looking flowers when you start getting a bit more tight and controlled with your palette knife marks as well. If you would like to do some more palette knife tutorials, maybe landscapes, maybe more floral specific types of flowers, feel free to drop me a line in my Facebook sharing group, or message me or email me. You can write comments on my website, and I'll make sure to try to squeeze in your favorite subject for palette knife painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed exploring the palette knife with me today, that you're feeling a lot more relaxed and more comfortable with your palette knife. I don't know about you, but this is one of my favorite styles of painting. It melts stress away like not a lot of other types of painting can. If I drop a blob of purple somewhere, I just have to smoosh it in and kind of go with it and create a flower. And there's something about working wet on wet. There's not a lot of, you can't overthink a painting like this. It's really quite physical, which is different from other mediums like watercolor or regular flat kind of acrylic painting. I would love to see your version of this tutorial. I know all of our paintings are going to be quite wildly different. It's just the nature of palette knife painting. You can't really duplicate it. Each one has a real life of its own. So if you share your project to social media, I am on Instagram and Facebook, and you can tag me at Keep It Colorful, all one word, so that I can find you. I also have a private Facebook sharing group. If you would like to join the group, it's a really fantastic and inspirational place to meet other painters and be inspired there by their own unique way of doing things. If you don't know, I do 2 new tutorials every weekend, and you can find all of my upcoming tutorials over on my website at jessierobertson.com. I have some really fun new tutorials coming up, including another palette knife tutorial. So this tutorial is going to be another palette knife tutorial, but we're going to be really focusing in and zeroing in on how to get these very specific flower shapes. So after today's tutorial, I'm going to zone in. We're going to do some sunset classes, how to do landscapes in the palette knife, and we're really going to focus in on different flower types, starting with this bouquet of tulips. We will be painting this cute little cow, Bloomin' Bessie. Blooming Bessie is the spring version of this 4 seasons of cows, and it matches our cute little Merry Christmas cow. We will be creating this cherry blossom bluebird together. And every season, almost every month, I like to do some fun whimsical characters, and I'm really into gnomes right now. So we're gonna paint this little spring gnomey, April showers gnome, and Easter is just around the corner. So we are gonna celebrate by painting this really adorable pastel little gnome. Well, that's it for me, everyone. Until next time, take care. Bye.